Hi, my name is Mike Dillard, and this is Self-Made Man, the podcast for those who want to leave their mark on the world and create a legacy of honor, integrity, and achievement in every aspect of your life. I'm glad you're here, and once again, it is time to forge your destiny. A few months ago, we interviewed Chris Haggeseth, the founder of Green Man Cannabis, and we talked about the incredible business opportunities that are being created right now as cannabis is quickly being legalized state by state here in the U.S. Well, today, we're joined by Dr. Mike Hart, who's one of the foremost experts in the world when it comes to the health benefits that cannabis and cannabinoid oils can provide. Now, if his name sounds familiar, it's because he was recently featured on Joe Rogan's podcast to discuss this very same topic. Now, personally, these plant medicines have provided the single biggest benefit to me over the past year while I've been dealing with the health challenges that I've discussed previously. So now I'm basically a walking, talking billboard for what this medicine can do. So today, Dr. Hart is going to walk us through the differences between the types of products and medicines being produced from this plant, what kind of effects they can have on the human body, where to find them, and how you can benefit from them as well. So please help me welcome Dr. Mike Hart. Dr. Mike Hart, welcome to the podcast. It's a pleasure to finally have you here on the show.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I'm really looking forward to it.
So you just got done with a big interview on Joe Rogan's podcast about a week or two ago, and I had to ask you how that experience went.
The experience was awesome. Joe was great to meet, really friendly guy. Showed me around his gym before we got in the podcast. We were talking a lot about mixed martial arts because that's another common passion that him and I share together. The podcast really went well. The whole studio is just first class, and I got nothing but good things to say about Joe and all the crew that he works with.
Was there anything that surprised you or stuck out the most when you obviously had that experience?
I think that I was, a lot of people are asking me, before you go in, are you nervous to meet Joe and all that type of stuff? And, I wasn't nervous. And the reason why I got to say is just because when you meet him, he's just a completely down to earth guy. I just felt like I was talking to one of my friends that I knew for about 10 years, so yeah. Just had a really great experience. And, when you kind of do bring that sort of down to earth quality that he certainly brings, then I think he just makes his guests and everyone feel really comfortable, right off the bat.
Yeah. I think that's one of the keys to Joe's success. Besides the fact that he's genius level IQ, the dude's just down to earth. He's just one of the guys, and I think that's where his mainstream appeal comes from. But that's cool. You're the first person I've had a chance to talk to that's been on the show. So I wanted to ask you about it and get a couple insights, which is neat. So today we're going to talk about your area of expertise, which is cannabis from a medicinal standpoint. And this is a topic that we have not talked about from the medicinal side of things. We did have a show about a month or two ago on the business side of cannabis and how that is growing like crazy, but we haven't talked about it from the health side. And as I've talked about on the show and in my emails, I've been dealing with some health stuff for the last year, specifically some really significant insomnia. And CBD oil and THC are the only things that have really helped. And it was like a night or day difference. And that was really the first time that I've used either of those compounds to get some kind of help medically. And it was life-changing. So I'm super excited to dive into this topic today because this is your area of expertise. I'm sure there's a lot of people who are listening to this who've maybe just tried CBD oil for the first time, but there's still some stigma around cannabis in general from all the brainwashing that we went through in the 80s. But how did you get involved in this area of expertise?
So I'm a family doctor, Mike, and after working for about a year or so, I just knew, in my heart that, cannabis could really be helping a lot of these patients, particularly with what you're discussing, Mike, which is insomnia. And I know that, a lot of your listeners may have insomnia because, a lot of ambitious men, when they go to bed at night, they just kind of can't turn off their mind and, things kind of just kind of spill over and they're unable to, feel relaxed and to fall asleep. And if you can't get in that state and if you can't fall asleep and wake up, feeling refreshed next morning, that's really going to, wreak havoc on your productivity and on your overall day. But, coming back to your question, like, how did I get started? I just knew that, these people were suffering and that they didn't need to suffer. There's no need to not include cannabis as part of someone's therapeutic treatment regimen. And it wasn't being offered to any of my patients. And, fortunately, in Canada in 2014, they changed a lot of the guidelines that made it a lot easier to prescribe cannabis. And, I've been doing that now for about 5 years. And since I've been doing it, the results have been incredible. And Mike, it sounds like you've had really good results with cannabis as well. So, when you put that together, people with the anecdotal evidence, and then, in a clinical setting, more evidence there, and then the evidence that's online with regards to, studies and PubMed, there seems to be a really good consensus as cannabis can be really effective for sleep.
So can you fill us in on the difference between CBD and THC and how these maybe get confused with people, which are legal, which isn't legal, at least here in the United States, and just kind of give us a big, broad overview for Cannabis 101, if you will.
Perfect. So there's over 100 cannabinoids in cannabis. So THC and CBD are just two of them. And those are the ones that we'll talk about because those are the ones people are using. So THC is the classic psychoactive cannabinoid that can get you high. CBD, or cannabidiol, is a non-psychoactive cannabinoid and it does not get you high. So when you take CBD, you are not going to experience any type of psychoactive effect. So a lot of times people do find CBD to be really effective during the daytime because, as I said, because there's no psychoactive effect, you're only going to get the benefits of the CBD, and you're very unlikely to feel tired or to feel any type of cognitive deficit whatsoever. And I think actually, I should just note to your listeners, Mike, that I think one of the ways that we actually connected was because I tweeted something about how CBD can actually decrease learned fear. And, that's an extremely therapeutic benefit for a lot of people who have anxiety, PTSD, depression, because, a lot of mental health just comes down to fear. And, none of us as humans, we're not born fearful. Like, this is something that we learned. Like, I mean, anxiety is learned. Depression is learned, PTSD, those are all learned things. So if we can unlearn those behaviors with CBD, that can be incredibly effective for people. Coming back to THC, so THC, even though it is psychoactive, it can still be extremely therapeutic for a lot of different conditions. Chronic pain is a big one, particularly if you have neuropathic pain. THC can be somewhat more effective than CBD. So the CBD is better more for repetitive type of injuries because it's an anti-inflammatory, whereas THC actually blocks the signal that goes from your pain receptors to your brain, telling you that you're in pain. So it's kind of blocking that off. So it can be extremely effective for neuropathic pain. And then, just to stay on top with regards to sleep. So a lot of people do find that when they combine THC with CBD, they can also get a good night's sleep. So there's some people who use CBD only and they find that to be effective for sleep. But there's some people who also do need just a small amount of THC. And the very interesting thing about when you use CBD in combination with THC is that CBD can actually negate some of the negative effects that comes along with THC. So some of the psychoactive effects like the paranoia, things like that. So that can be negated with CBD. So it should be noted, that when you use the two of them in combination together at a low dose, a lot of people actually do not feel any type of psychoactivity from using THC.
Can you talk about dosing? Because there's a lot of different laws involved, at least in Colorado. We know when you go into a shop, there's a limit to how much you can buy based on the total amount of THC in that particular product or what you can purchase in a day. And then on CBD oils, it's different. Like the product I take is 990 milligrams per serving or per pill. And then there's others that are like 5 milligrams, right? So it's almost 1,000 milligrams versus 5 milligrams versus 10 milligrams. Like there's a lot of confusion around the dosing.
Well, I do want to say before I answer this question, I'm happy to answer it, that, I don't really want to give medical advice right now. So I'm really speaking from personal opinion and personal experience, but I can definitely, guide some people into how they may be able to negate some of the risks and maximize the benefits of it. So, if you've never used any cannabis before, your THC receptors are going to be extremely naive, meaning that if you use, right, are sensitive. So if you use any type of THC, you're likely going to feel a psychoactive effect. So, you need to know that before going into it, because there's some people that, as soon as they feel any type of psychoactivity, they basically start to freak out and get paranoid and get anxious. So, if that's you, it might be best to kind of stay away from THC almost altogether. But, getting back to sort of like starting doses. So let's just talk about pure CBD first. So, a lot of people find that, I know you mentioned a huge range there, but even just 10 milligrams to be effective to start. Now, there's other people that need, 20 milligrams, and there's other people that need, even more, even like 30 milligrams. Usually, for my patients, they don't use too much more than 30 milligrams. I might have, one or two patients that have actually gotten up to 60, but for the most part, I mean, a lot of people do well in like the 20 to 30 range, or the 10 to 30 range. Right around 20 seems to be a sweet spot for a lot of people. And then also to the frequency. So, unfortunately, the half-life for CBD is not that long. Depending on which study you look at, it's about 4 to 8 hours. And a lot of patients will kind of tell me that the effects last only about 4 to 6 hours. So because of that, a lot of patients are using CBD oil 3 to even 4 times a day. And when I just did, real small Twitter poll on my social media, people did say that 4 times a day was their most effective dosing regimen. So I think that, you always want to start low and go slow, but at the same time too, this is a medicine where you have to be very self-aware. So meaning that, I can tell you and I can guide you, 10 milligrams might be enough. But if it's not enough, like, you're going to have to know. I'm not going to be able to tell you that, and nobody else is either. So, it's a medicine where, you have to be self-aware, and, self-awareness is certainly, a little bit of a subjective thing, but everyone needs to be, to be better at that if they want to get the best cannabis experience. If I was going to use THC with CBD, again, you'd want to start off on a really low dose. Any more than, say, like 5 milligrams of THC to 5 milligrams of CBD. I mean, even that for some people might even be like pushing the border as to some type of psychoactivity to it. But I wouldn't do any more, say, than 5 milligrams of each at a time to start. And then if you didn't feel any type of psychoactivity from the 5 milligrams of THC and the 5 milligrams of CBD, you could then, say, go up by 5 milligrams. So say 10 milligrams of THC and 10 milligrams of CBD, and put that together.
Yeah.
I think that would be, a fairly safe and conservative approach, but definitely still therapeutic.
Yeah, that's the dose I first tried, was a pill that combined 10 of CBD and 10 of THC, and that was game changing. That allowed me to get off of all of my pharmaceuticals that I was on around the sleep stuff, and get about twice the amount of rest that I was getting on the drugs themselves. So yeah, game changing for sure. What is the difference, if any? This is just a question that I've seen out there on the internet and gotten from people, between, let's say, hemp oil and CBD oil. Is it the exact same thing, just going by a different name for legal reasons, or what's the difference between them?
Okay, so this is something, unfortunately, that I'm not a big expert on, but I can give you all the information that I do have. So I work in Canada in the medical system, so my patients only order products that are full spectrum cannabis products, so they get the full cannabis plant and the oil. So the big difference really when you're looking at cannabis oil versus hemp oil is, a lot of people believe that in cannabis oil, you're getting all of the cannabinoids, all of the terpenes, and there's something called an entourage effect, which is a term that was coined by Dr. Ethan Russo around 2004, basically stating that all the cannabinoids and the terpenes have to be in the plant to work together. And that's why, a lot of people do better when they use, say, a high CBD cannabis strain versus say a hemp oil strain. The hemp, from my understanding, it's just CBD. There's no other medicines in there, and because of that, people don't get the same effect. And then just through talking with other people, I mean, some people have told me that they just don't get the same effect from hemp oil as the CBD oil, and that's been something that I find people just have kept repeating to me. But there are other people who say that they do find hemp oil to be effective. So that's something that I think we still really need to kind of maybe do a little bit more research on.
Okay, so that's really good to know. And do you have any preferred CBD quality or branded products that are available here in the US? Because there's such a difference in product quality, and it's hard to tell what you're buying and consuming without it coming from someone who has expertise like yourself, basically, who can vouch for a product brand.
I understand that, and I understand that's a big issue right now. And as you alluded to earlier, these 5 milligram capsules versus 900 milligrams. Like, there's got to be, obviously there's some type of quality control that's lost there. So because I live in Canada, Mike, unfortunately, I don't know too much about the side in the United States with regards to how to get like a good CBD or hemp product. People have asked me that before. I'm not tied to any companies or anything either. So, unfortunately, my best advice is to, try to speak to a physician and get a full spectrum cannabis if you can. But otherwise, I really don't have too much else to say on that topic, Mike. I apologize.
Okay, no problem. Can you talk to people about the differences in how your body processes cannabinoids when they're, let's just say, smoking it versus ingesting it orally?
Sure. So that's a really good question, and this definitely ties into sleep as well. So I'm really happy that you asked it. So just for sleep, for instance, a lot of people have trouble falling asleep. Some people have trouble staying asleep, and some people have trouble for both. So you want to pick a cannabis product that's going to suit you best. So if you have trouble falling asleep, you actually may do better with, say, vaping, because when you vape, it hits you almost immediately. You're going to feel it within 2 or 3 minutes, 5 minutes for sure. And then it's going to last 45 minutes to potentially up to 3 to even 4 hours for some people. So, if you come home at the end of the day and you just need something to kind of like put you out and you're someone who's able to fall asleep, I think vaping can be really, really effective. Now, if you're someone who, can fall asleep quickly, but you tend to wake up throughout the night, then, you're going to want to use an oil product, because an oil product, unfortunately, they do take at least 30 minutes, but sometimes even up to 2 hours to really fully kick in. But they can stay in your system to 4 to 8 hours. So, for people who have trouble staying asleep, the oil products are better. Now, if you're someone who has trouble with both, and a lot of people do have trouble with both, then what you can do is that you can use the vape to help you fall asleep, and then the oil to help you stay asleep. And then conveniently, if you take both of them at the same time, what will likely happen, or hopefully will happen, is that when you use the vape, that'll help you fall asleep. And then just as the vape is kind of coming out of your system, the oil is really going to start to hit, and then that'll really keep you asleep.
Yeah, that's what I found as well. I found the oil was much more effective at helping me get another extra hour to 2 of sleep versus vaping, which would just last about an hour and a half for me, and then it was gone. So important distinction for sure. So who should be looking into taking one or both of these substances for what kind of ailments? Who could really benefit from this?
So I think the biggest benefiters of cannabis, it's really, really, really close, but I'd say the slight edge would go to people who suffer from chronic pain. But then, right under there, anyone with insomnia or also some mental health. And, when I say mental health, I don't feel like you have to have been diagnosed with, a mental health disorder from a doctor and have had to try a bunch of different prescription medications to benefit from cannabis. I think that even if you are healthy mentally and you feel well, there's lots of people who are in that scenario who use CBD almost as like a supplement, and it just gives them a little bit of an extra edge. It can just kind of decrease their stress a little bit to a point where they can feel like they can function better and they can think better. They can think more logically. So, I think it's really important to distinguish that it can help people who have medical conditions and a certain medical diagnosis. But I also think that it can help people who are also just kind of looking to get an edge. So in that way, you could say that it can act as an incredible medicine, because how can you not say it's a medicine when it's taking someone, say, from like 20 or 25 seizures a day to like zero, and there are people out there who are like that. But then there are also healthy people who are doing well, but they might have a little bit of stress in their lives. They use a little bit of CBD. They find that stress goes away, and then their productivity and their overall well-being kind of improves. So I think it's important to make that distinction that people can benefit from this medically, purely as a medicine, and people can benefit from this just for daily use, for increasing overall productivity and well-being at work.
What are some of the more amazing success stories that you've seen? Because I know there's been quite a few of them.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of them kind of sound, somewhat similar to what you're discussing, to your, personal situation, Mike. Is basically, a lot of people who came to see me were on a pharmaceutical, and sometimes they had some benefit initially, or maybe not even at all. And then when they tried the cannabis, not only did they get better relief and less side effects, but they were able to come off their other medications. And just as an example, I mean, I had a girl who, again, she was around 20 years old. She couldn't drive. You can imagine, not being able to drive when you're 20 years old, the freedom that's kind of taken away from you at that point. Watching your other friends drive and you not being able to do it. And she just used a little bit of CBD oil. It's been about 5 years now. She's never had to increase her dose, and she's seizure free. She got her license back, about 6 or 12 months, I think, after we started. And she's been able to drive ever since. So that's someone who's, obviously using it medically. But in addition to that, I mean, the veterans that I see in my practice, like the people with PTSD, like I had guys literally on 14 medicines a day, if you can believe it or not, 14 different prescriptions. And they would leave their home maybe 5, maybe 10 days a month just to go to the groceries or just for appointments. And actually, a lot of them actually couldn't even get their groceries because going into any type of a busy center would just be too much brain
anxiety.
Yeah, too much anxiety that they couldn't handle. And then at night, I mean, these guys, it's not like they're getting 6 or 7 hours of kind of broken sleep. Like they're getting like 2 or 3 hours of sleep, and it's all nightmares, right? So they're just waking up, sweating, feeling terrible, not able to function. And then, of course, in the daytime, that all just transfers over, because if you have a poor night's sleep, just like anyone, it's going to affect you the next day. You're not going to feel well mentally, or you're not going to have a good sense of well-being without a good night's sleep. So, when you get guys on CBD in the day, get them out of their home, it's just unbelievable to hear, a veteran say that, hey man, I was able to get, my groceries for like the first time in like 3 years. Like it just feels so good. Or, I was actually able to sleep next to my wife last night. We've always had to sleep in separate rooms because, my nightmares are just kind of driven her crazy. Some of these people, they don't mean to, but they even get violence sometimes in their nightmares, because it can kick and scream and these types of things. So, almost all of my veteran patients do have a story, similar to that. Some are more extreme than others, but overall, the response that I've gotten from the veteran community has just been incredibly positive. And just quickly on that note, I should just quickly mention that THC does reduce nightmares, and that's part of the reason why a lot of vets use THC at night, is because it has been shown to reduce nightmares, and that's why they're getting the results that they're getting.
Very cool. On the flip side of things, what are some of the potential side effects, if any, that people need to think about or be concerned about, whether it's short-term use or long-term use, and any issues around the liver and all of that good stuff that people need to be aware of?
Sure. Yeah. Let's go over a couple things. So, for sure, I want to separate this into if you're below 25 and if you're above 25. So, your listeners may or may not know, Mike, that before 25, your brain's actually not fully developed. So because of that, we advise people not to use THC during that period of their life. So, if you're below 18, I don't think we should be using it at all. And then, maybe if you're 21 in extreme circumstances under the care of a physician, maybe a 1-to-1 would be effective for you. But I think that we should be really careful about.
And real quick, just to interrupt you, a 1-to-1 means a 1-to-1 ratio of CBD and THC. So maybe 10 milligrams and 10 milligrams.
Yes, correct. Thank you for making that distinction. So I think that would be something that would be really effective for people overall is to know that if you use THC before 25, it can accelerate a process called pruning. And pruning basically is a process that we all go through in adolescence, where we shed off weak connections so that we can build stronger ones. So during this period, it appears that cannabis can actually, I shouldn't say cannabis, THC specifically, can actually accelerate that process. And because of that process, that's why people who use cannabis when they're very, very young can potentially have a mental illness when they're older. So we do need to make that distinction and let people know about that, because that's I think by far the worst negative side effect from THC is just using it too early. But on that note, I don't have any issues whatsoever with anyone using CBD during that period, because CBD, like I said, it's non-psychoactive. It does not accelerate the process of pruning. So because of that, you're just going to get a really effective medicine without the negative side effect from the THC. And from my own, personal clinical experience, I've treated a lot of adolescents and young adults with CBD oil, and they've done extremely well. So I don't want to say that anyone below 25 shouldn't use cannabis, just that anyone below 25 shouldn't be using THC. That's the most important part. With regards to like healthy adults who are just using cannabis, I mean, one of the biggest things or drawbacks, and everyone knows about this, is well known, is that, it can increase your hunger, right? So and we all know that there's a huge, obesity epidemic right now, and we want to minimize that. And the way, that works is THC attaches to the CB1 receptor, and you get an increase in this hormone called ghrelin, and ghrelin can induce hunger. And because of that, people get, quote unquote, the munchies, right? So in order to minimize that, there's a couple different strategies that you can do. First of all, you do want to limit your THC use. Secondly, you want to use CBD in combination with your THC, because that'll also inhibit it. And then lastly, kind of what some people do, and maybe, you're kind of like this too, Mike, is that a lot of people only use it for sleep. So literally they use the medicine and they just go to bed, and they don't even give themselves like a window because to eat, because they're not up during that time. So there's a few different ways to kind of get around it. And then also too, this is something that I've talked about before, but I sometimes don't talk about that often because it hasn't been brought to market, not commercially yet, is THCV. So I was stating earlier there was like over 100 cannabinoids. So THCV is another cannabinoid. THCV has actually been shown to reduce appetite. So I think that when we get that on the market, that's going to be the next cannabinoid, because that'll definitely help with some of the hunger issues that people go through when they do use THC.
Yeah. I use mine at night, 30 minutes before I go to bed, and I'm out. So that's kind of how I've enjoyed it. Does CBD oil have any direct impact on cortisol levels?
On cortisol levels, I can't say off the top of my head if I know that for a fact, so I don't want to say yes. I will say that in general, As we all know, cortisol is associated with stress. And as I chatted about earlier, like CBD can reduce learned fear, and there's so many studies that show that it can reduce anxiety and increase your overall feelings of well-being actually fairly quickly, like within 30 minutes, which is a really important distinction between CBD and SSRIs, selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, which are the main set of drugs that people use for anxiety and depression these days. Is that CBD can kick in right away, or SSRIs like 6 weeks. But coming back to your question, I haven't seen that specifically. That's something that I'll have to look up. It's a really good question. But I imagine that through chronic use, you would see an overall decrease in cortisol just through less accumulation of stress. But I can't say that I've seen that in a study.
Okay, interesting. One of the obvious benefits is a reduction in general anxiety when you take CBD oil. How can entrepreneurs use that during their day to be more productive, more effective? And are they going to feel, let's just say, lethargic or run down in energy? Comparing it to drinking a glass of wine or alcohol, right? If I have that, I'm going to get sleepy. I'm not going to work anymore. Is CBD going to feel the same way for folks, or is it going to be different?
So a lot of people find CBD to be extremely effective during the daytime for actually enhancing their overall productivity. And, for me, the reason why is really simple. I think that a lot of productivity comes down to, are you in a good mental state without anxiety? Because if you have anxiety, your mind is only going to be focused on that anxiety. Your brain's not going to be focused on the task at hand, and you're not going to be able to be your most productive self. What CBD allows a lot of people to do is that it eliminates that kind of background anxiety. And because that background anxiety is eliminated, they're able to focus more during the day. Now, a lot of people don't have anxiety every day. They just have anxiety some days or in certain situations. And they'll often say, if I could just have a day every day like I did yesterday, or if I could just have, 5 days like I did yesterday, I'd be so much more productive. And I think that's what's happening when a lot of people do have these ultra high productive days or high well-being days. It's really because their anxiety was reduced and that their productivity was increased. And what CBD can do is it can reduce that anxiety. And then because that background anxiety is reduced, people are able to be more productive. And, I'm sure a lot of your listeners know, Mike, that as soon as you complete one task, the next task becomes much easier to complete because of that dopamine spike that you get from completing the first task. That's why a lot of people say, to make your bed in the morning, because when you make your bed, it's like one task done, and then you just go on to the next task. And I think that CBD really helps put you in that ultra high productivity state by decreasing that background anxiety that a lot of people have. Now, with regards to lethargy, as long as you stick to low to medium doses, like we were talking about, 10 to 30 milligrams, right around 20 seems to be really good for a lot of people. You shouldn't get any type of fatigue from CBD. If you do find that you're getting any fatigue from CBD, just lower the dose until you have less fatigue. And then, that may be, and then you'll have to tease out the correct dose for yourself.
Gotcha. Very cool. Very cool. And any weird side effects that people should be aware of? Allergies. I mean, this is such a benign substance that's why, for those of you who live in Colorado, California, Oregon, and some of these places where cannabis is legal, I hope you're taking advantage of it, because there's so many benefits. And, if you're not living in the dark ages like we still are here in Texas, then, man, take advantage of it, because this can really, really, really help you, especially if you're going through a ton of stress and anxiety. When it comes to business, entrepreneurship, as my friend Josh likes to say, is a full contact sport. And it hit me with a 2x4 this last year. So I hope that folks will take advantage of it. But again, to get back to my question, side effect wise or allergies wise, is there anything that anyone needs to be worried about here before trying a CBD product?
Every now and then, when someone uses a higher dose of CBD, like beyond 20 milligrams, some people may say that they get a little bit of a headache, and some people may say that they get a little bit of fatigue. But outside of that, I really haven't had any real complaints from any of my patients with regards to side effects from CBD. It's really incredible overall. When you look at the benefit versus the safety, it's incredible.
Yeah, I mean that's where I'm at, where it's like there's the upside versus the downside is almost incomparable compared to any other kind of supplement or medication out there. There's just so many benefits with so little downside that it's silly not to be experimenting with these products and seeing how they help you. At least that's in my 2 cents. So very cool. So you're based in Canada, but this is a topic that you're extremely passionate about, and we actually met through Twitter. I don't remember exactly how, if I found you or whatnot through the topic in my research or vice versa, but you're definitely one of the foremost authorities when it comes to this topic. Where can folks go to connect with you and learn more about this, tap into your education and what you guys put out?
Sure. So you can go to my website, which is mikehartmd.com. If you want to know more about my clinic is readytogoclinic.com. And as Mike mentioned earlier, I did do a 3-hour podcast with Joe Rogan last week, so you can find that online as well. And then my social media is at Dr. Mike Hart. That's DrMikeHart. And I'm on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and Instagram. And you can find me there. I usually post something every day.
Awesome. Well, Mike, thank you so much for taking the time to join us and fill us in on this really important health topic. Guys, I can't recommend enough that y'all look into this and again, try a CBD product. It's legal in all 50 states here in the US, and it's really, really helped me a lot. So I would love to hear y'all's feedback if you try it for yourselves as well. So Mike, thanks again for joining us. I really appreciate you. And guys, gals, thank you as always for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it with everybody that you know. If you think that they could benefit from the topic that we discussed today, please let them know about it. And if you're on iTunes right now, I'd love it if you could give us a 5-star review on the show, which really helps us introduce these amazing interviews with these awesome experts to other people so that they can benefit from them as well. So thanks so much, and we'll see you next week. Take care.